What's it gonna be, Riot? Oh, look at this.
My selection speaks for itself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the trailer.
Across the way.
The trailer, guys. We got the trailer.
Neither the flames nor the depths could claim me.
That's how we do things in Bilgewater.
Maybe they did reveals after the trailer. Is this optimistic? Hang on. I'm refreshing. Please. Please. Anything. Come on. God damn it. Refresh. New cards. Refresh now. Oh shit! This is it, guys! New cards! If the payoff... If the payoff is here, dude! Oh! We finally arrived! Alright, this is it, guys. Perfect. Plunder Poro. Plunder. A card triggers its Plunder ability when played if you damaged the enemy Nexus this round. Okay, so you have to play it after you've damaged the enemy Nexus, and if you do, you get 2 random keywords. Okay, so obviously this Poro is a meme card. And then we've got some of these. This is it. This is it, guys. Citrus Courier. 6 mana, Plunder, heal allies in your Nexus 3, then rally. Holy shit! Ooh! Oh, that's weird. It's like a scurvy joke. So basically, the idea here is that it's just kind of like, it's sort of like a Tiana Crown Guard in a way, because you kind of want to often be playing Tiana after an attack anyway. Is kind of the idea, and it heals everything by 3. Wow. Could this actually be really good? This is hard to evaluate. I could see this card being really good or really bad. We'll have to come back to that one later. Warning shot. 0 mana burst, deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. This is probably like something that's kind of related to a skill. You're pretty much not going to want that outside of very specific combo stuff. Smooth Soloist. Elusive. Plunder, reduce the cost of allies in your hand and deck by 2. So this is a really, really hilarious card. It's one of the worst cards I've ever seen. Okay, Jagged Taskmaster. Plunder, grant 1 cost allies everywhere, plus 1 attack. Ooh, man. It's pretty interesting. I mean, it has a decent stat line, and you can easily make a deck that's kind of full of 1 cost allies. This is something that we'll see a lot of experimentation for sure. I think there will be ways to mess around with this for high value. Von Yip deck? Yeah, it would be like a Bilgewater Von Yip. We could try building that deck and see how it goes. It could be like Bilgewater Von Yip. Here, 1 second. It could be Bilgewater Von Yip, and basically you just make an entire deck around 1 cost allies. You would have to have like some things that can trigger the Plunder ability. Maybe like Static Shock would be decent, because all you need to have done is damage the Nexus, right? That turn. So having like some kinds of spells to do that while like tutoring for your options is gonna be good. And then finally, they revealed Stormclaw Ursine before. Now we get to see what actually summons it, because this isn't a card you can put in your deck, it's a token. And it gets summoned by Ursine Spiritwalker. Plunder, I transform into Stormclaw Ursine. So even though Plunder is presumably a mostly Bilgewater mechanic, this is a Freljord card that has it. So basically, it's a 5/4/6 that if you have plundered that round, it's a 5/6/6 with Overwhelm that gives other allies +5 power and Overwhelm. That is pretty good. Holy shit. Wow. That is pretty good, dude. That is pretty good. The Tusk Raider. Plunder. Double the power and health of allies in your deck. Play. Draw a Sejuani. So we've got a tutor for Sejuani. Kind of like we had the tutor for Swain before. Interesting, interesting. Double the power and health of allies in your deck. I mean, it's a little crazy. It comes out at 8, but you can ramp into this too. It's in Freljord, and Freljord already has ramp, and it draws you a card. This is actually a little crazy, I think. When you can super Hearthguard, yeah, it's super Hearthguard. If you can cheat this out like a little bit early, it's kind of insane. Like when you compare this to the other card, it's kind of like the same thing, right? Or not, sorry, not this card, the really, really bad one, Smooth Soloist. It's like reducing cost. In the late game, reducing the cost of things almost doesn't matter, right? And cheating this out early is like harder to do, because you're in a color that can't cheat things out, so you have to lock yourself into a second color, which is really, really limiting. This one is insane. It's got better stats too. it draws you a Sejuani, which is like top end. This card could actually be nuts. I mean, it's expensive, it's late game, and you don't usually need stats this late. I think it's less good than it looks. It probably looks like the most OP broken shit ever to grace God's earth. I think that this is a very good card. It's probably less hyper insane than it looks, but it's very good. Don't get me wrong. Wolf Rider. Plunder, get an empty mana gem. Yeah, that's kind of crazy too. I mean, the combo between Wolf Rider and Tusk Raider is really sick. Like, being able to, like, cheat out Tusk Raider 1 or 2 turns early is kind of unfair. Like, if you can get a situation where you're playing Tusk Raider on, like, turn 6, you've kind of won the game, depending on the matchup. Obviously, a lot of aggro decks might still be good, but giving, like, an additional fairly high-value ramp tool to the idea of, like, something like Tusk Raider, now you've got 3 decent ramp tools in the game. Freljord might be, like, a monster region, actually. Freljord's been pretty weak for most of Runeterra, with the exception of arguably the preview patches overall. But they're like, and everything's getting good tools, but Freljord might be getting the best tools out of everything. Freljord's getting, like, really crazy stuff. Yeah, I mean, we've got, basically the idea of just dealing Nexus damage and ramping with this card. It's gonna change the way that you play ramp as an archetype. I think that the idea behind ramp has been for a while. The way you ramp into the late game has been with Catalyst of Eons, Weirding Stones, Avalanche, and a committed double float. Is kind of the way you ramp. And I think this card single-handedly changes that. Although I might be overestimating how tricky it might be to activate the Plunder. I don't think I am. But we'll see. This card is much better than Catalyst. Obviously, you do have to activate Plunder, which means, you know, maybe you could run some things that are dealing face damage. You're probably going to run this with, like, Sejuani. The Sejuani, Plunder, Wolf Rider, Tusk Raider, Stormclaw. Well, you might not run this in that deck. Or maybe you still would. But, like, Sejuani is becoming nuts. Because it's showing that it's kind of, like, part of an entire very powerful archetype, where Sejuani is even, if anything, maybe only a peripheral card, because it seems like you just want ways to enable Plunder, you want Tusk Raider to be nuts, and that's gonna draw you a Sejuani, and Sejuani's cost that you're paying into her with is kind of the same as Wolf Riders, which you want to go out of your way to enable. So it seems like Sejuani is kind of like a side card in her own deck, almost. It's just like, you play for Plunder, you play for ramp, and Sejuani becomes like this kind of very good finisher that's eating into all the same costs. You're kind of double dipping into those costs, which is kind of crazy. What is Plunder? Plunder activates if you've played this card after you've dealt Nexus damage that turn. So what that means is, if I do like Blade's Edge and then I play this card, Plunder will activate. If I attack and that attack does Nexus damage and then I play this card afterward, Plunder will activate. Ember Maiden. Yeah, Ember Maiden is a good way to activate Plunder as well. Ember Maiden on 3 into Wolf Rider on 4 is going to be kind of the shit. This is like, this is really crazy. This looks like unfair, actually. This looks like crazy unfair. It's like you play Ember, you can still do the same double float, right? And you always would double float. You play Ember on 3 into Wolf Rider on 4. You're playing like a Sejuani Tusk Raider deck. If you cheat out the Tusk Raider on like turn 6, which is very doable, this card becomes like really crazy. It's like this basically, I feel like this will invalidate all other forms of mid-range. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not an unbeatable deck. At the end of the day, it's a ramp deck. You are still going to be able to like go under them with maybe like aggressive decks. You're gonna have a hard time into Ember Maiden, don't get me wrong. You can probably like go under them with aggressive decks, and there are ways of controlling the strategy, but like, how do you beat this mid-range to mid-range? Like, how do you beat Wolf Rider on 4 into like Catalyst plus X on 5 into Tusk Raider on 6? That's fucking hard. And that draws you like a Sejuani too. That's fucking hard. Like, this just feels like it will force a lot of other decks out of the game. That again, it's not unbeatable. It still gets countered by some things, but man, it's really crazy. You draw after the effects, so the Sejuani has double HP and attack. I mean, we don't know for sure exactly the order in which that will work, but I mean, presumably, yeah. Presumably, that's the order in which it will work. I mean, that seems to kind of be part of this card's... That seems to be part of how this card works. That only works if you have a god hand, though. Well, I'm not... Obviously, I mean, all of those are 3 of that you're mulliganing for. don't get me wrong, it's not like you're gonna Tusk Raid on 6 every single game, but when you do, it's GG. When you Tusk Raid on 7, it still feels pretty good in a lot of matchups, and I mean, it's, yeah, you don't have to get that stars aligned situation for this card to be good. That's kind of the point. But when it happens, you can't really beat it. You want to combine it with, you might actually be out of Shadow Isles at that point. Shadow Isles has a lot of good control tools, but they have a hard time triggering Sejuani and Plunder. And honestly, the one way this deck might be, I mean, a lot worse than I think, and than a lot of you guys think, is if Plunder is just like really, really hard to trigger. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be easy, but Plunder will single-handedly force you out of Shadow Isles probably, and into either Noxus or PNZ to try to activate this Plunder effects. So it'll be like, yeah, like, or Bilgewater. Is there anything in Bilgewater we've seen that you would want to combine this with? Probably not. I mean, we don't know Bilgewater, but maybe. But out of what we know, Noxus and PNZ are going to be best. You're definitely overrating these cards swim. They all need setup and seem slow. They're slow cards. They will not be able to work in like every single matchup, but I think that the buy-in cost for these cards is really, really, really low. I don't think Tusk Raider is a bad card in many matchups if you play it on turn 8. I don't think Wolf Rider is a bad card if you have to have like the deck building cost of the Plunder. Like Ember Maiden is like kind of the perfect anti-aggro card. With the current state of aggro in the game, like it feels really, really hard to get over Ember Maiden, plus like minor ways of keeping her alive. Warning Shot? Guys, why does Warning Shot matter? Warning Shot is literally just like a worse Blade's Edge. Do I want the burst speed? Are they gonna like deny my Blade's Edge? This is one card, guys. We can't be in a region for one card. It's very possible that Bilgewater could be a good second region. That's probably the third option. But I mean, right now PNZ is probably top of the list, right? I mean, you want something that's actually gonna be able to slow play. Immediate Plunder. So basically, the idea is you don't have to like bank mana into your Tusk Raider, I guess. I don't know if that's worth an entire card. That seems kind of weird, guys. I understand it activates Plunder. The deck building requirement is not let's activate Plunder. Like, that's not what we're looking for, guys. We want something that can activate Plunder, and depending on what we're, like, I mean, depending on how the game and the metas are playing out, maybe we want that something to be 0 mana. Usually you would prefer flexibility, right? I don't know. I mean, Bilgewater, like, Plunder is kind of their mechanic, so maybe they'll end up with more ways. It's very possible, don't get me wrong. That's a good guess, but I don't know if Warning Shot is better than, like, Blade's Edge. The ability, don't get me wrong, the ability to have 0 mana is nice sometimes. When you queue into an aggro deck, you'd like to have a card that can win you the game instead of doing nothing. It's like when you queue into aggro and they play like Saboteur on 1 and your hand is like Warning Shot instead of Blade's Edge, that's like you are dropping a very significant amount of your win rate in that spot already. Like that's like something like 10%. Like not having an answer in that fairly common spot against like one of the decks that could in theory counter this, depending on how good aggro is, seems kind of insane to me. Like 0 mana is nice sometimes, don't get me wrong, but unless you're buying into the burst speed or you're in this region for something else, you don't want to be running like 0 mana cards. Meme deck potential with multiple Tusk Raiders into 100 attack. Yeah, it's kind of like a funny meme deck. So what more is there to break down here? What do you guys think of Citrus Courier? I don't know, I think Rally is a pretty strong mechanic, and like discounting it and attaching it to a body is kind of nice. Usually decks that want to rally care literally 0 about healing their Nexus, so the Nexus is kind of like useless. And then the idea of like healing allies, I don't know, healing allies is usually not that good for those kinds of decks too. Cheaper Tiana. Yeah, I mean it's a much cheaper Tiana. It's got to be better than Tiana. And Tiana is a card that is somewhat playable. More rally. Bilgewater confirms second rally region. Third rally region. I'll thank you very much. Would you forget about Shunpo? I think he's good in a mid-range deck as a finisher, something like Bannerman. Yeah. I don't know. He actually could be kind of toxic. Like, it's really hard to evaluate this card. This card is either going to be really fucking good or really fucking bad. And that's usually how Rally exists as a mechanic. Rally is one of the mechanics that I think is the most flawed from a design standpoint. Pretty much for that reason. It's either going to be non-existent or the most toxic thing ever. And I think that there's almost no rally card that's really exempt from this necessarily. Pretty much. It's like you could design a rally card in a way that would make it less polarizing, but I don't think there's room in design for something that's going to be as crazy polarizing as rally, in my opinion. Something more like Scout, I think, feels a little bit better, where Scout is still polarizing and it's still either a redouble or a blank, but it's on a unit basis rather than a board basis, so it ends up being like less polarizing overall. Okay, but yeah, Citrus Courier, I actually am a little worried about this card. I think this card might actually be kind of OP, but I think when you take Tiana and make her 6 mana, I think 6 is like the perfect turn for this card. I think that there's a lot of cards. One of the ways of evaluating cards isn't really to do with ratios or isn't really to do with effects or like normal value calculation, but it's just a very, very simple, okay, what timing of the game in general do you often want this kind of effect on? Turn 6 is like kind of the scariest, most perfect turn for this card to come down on. Really. Like, you're usually not going to want this earlier than 6. It's like, if you have a body plus rally, like, 6 is like perfect as like a game closer before a lot of the control decks are coming out with any of their conditions at all. Cytheria the Bold. Yes, that's a large part of the reason why Cytheria is good. Because she just comes out as a finisher on 6, right? So, I mean, let's compare Citrus Courier to Cytheria. Cytheria is really hard to remove, but as a 4/5, this is too, right? Cytheria forces you to develop into your attack, whereas this gives you like a second attack. I think this card could be really fucking good. I don't know, man. I think this could be crazy. I think this card is fucking nuts and I hate rally, God help me. I agree with you, Mago. I really do. I think this is actually an insane card. I think this is completely insane. But yeah, there's nothing I dislike more in this game than rally, from a design standpoint. Citrus Courier also like pushes your lines into open attacks. That's the thing. Like, when you compare this to Cytheria, like the single biggest thing between these two cards is that Cytheria forces you to play before combat, whether you want to or not. And this card leans into open attack and replay. And that is crazy. That is crazy. The fact that it's incentivizing you further into the line you kind of wanted to do anyway, that's a big cost of Cytheria. The fact that she forces you to develop into her. It's huge. It's huge. This with Scouts is dope. Yeah, I mean, you can maybe run this with Scouts too. Like, that's fine. And it's like, unlike normal rallies, it's uncounterable. The Plunder effect, with this card in particular, out of all the cards that have Plunder abilities, this card's Plunder ability is basically automatically activated. It's like, they pretty much can never stop this from happening. If you build a deck where, let's just imagine a Demacia shell, because you guys are familiar with Bannerman. But it could look like a lot of different things. Let's imagine, like, you know, Demacia mid-range package. You're kind of running a lot of the same, like, tempo cards. Feels kind of very Hearthstone-y, with just, like, you know, your curve plays, your developments, super stat lines, and challenger. You are basically playing Hearthstone. It's just, like, attacker's advantage, check. Just stat lines on curve plays, check. And then, at that point, it's like, you come down with a finisher with this on 6, and like, you're always gonna have a wider board. You're always gonna open attack on 6 or 7, depending on whether you're attacking odds or evens. And you're always gonna have a board state that can force this Plunder to go off. It's gonna be really hard to deactivate this Plunder, I think, from the opponent's perspective. Elusive plus Citrius Courier, and you can still play Hatchling on turn 7. Yeah, I mean, you could run this in Elusive. Why not? This one's yikes. Ugh, man. This is the type of mid-range deck that can win against double power / defense of your cards. Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is the kind of card that will cause the meta to be in a state where cards like Tusk Rider will actually be not that good. Like, that's exactly right. But yeah. Also, it's really, really important that you are basically... So there's a couple things happening here, right? There's a couple things happening with this effect. Which is that... Well, okay. I mean, presumably, we can assume this is undeniable, right? It's a pretty big deal that they can't deny it. It's like with normal Relentless Pursuit, deny is a really... tends to be a decent counter for it. Because usually they have to represent Pursuit. That's kind of the biggest flaw with Pursuit, which is that you know, I mean, it's hard to maybe guess whether they have it or not, but if you have it, you have to play like you have it. They can save deny, and they can feel okay about that. I mean, they're still kind of down trading, but maybe they can like stabilize the turn after, which is undeniable. Now we don't know. It's possible it's a skill. It's possible it goes to the stack and it is deniable. I think they're no. It would have the little circle icon, right? Yeah, they added that circle icon. So yeah, that's not even the case. I don't know. I really hope I'm wrong about this one. I would love to be wrong about this because I'm very concerned. So this is kind of like the new bundle reveal. I kind of expect with the size of this, and now that they've announced Bilgewater, my guess is we're gonna be getting a new bundle of cards every day. That's my guess. That